Hello everyone and welcome to another demo. Today I'm going to be taking you through several steps in a different process. This is not direct painting, this is indirect, meaning I'm going to be doing this in layers. And I've decided to record each of the layers, I guess each of the stages, as a separate video. That'll keep it from being too long, because I don't plan on cutting. Well, I'm going to make some cuts, but I'm not planning on cutting much. So if you find yourself getting a little bored watching me paint, then you can skip ahead. Otherwise, the content is there for you to watch and learn from. Hopefully you learn something. So let me take you through what I'm doing. I'm drawing, essentially, getting my outlines established for a landscape. I'm working on a ground that I toned previously, and it was about 3 or 4 days, maybe 3 or 4 days, yeah, before this, which you're watching now. And all that is a color, if I can remember specifically, I think it's red, light red oxide, something like that. It's a Rembrandt color. All of the paints I'm using for this demo are from Rembrandt. And I do believe it is that light oxide red, I think is the name of it. Anyway, I diluted it fairly heavily with Gamsol, and I gave it a couple coats with about, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days in between. Very, very thin. You can still actually see the gray. I had toned it with a N5 neutral gray acrylic prior to that and let that dry. But even after 2 coats of the ground, you can still see that gray through it. That's how thin those coats were. So I'm painting on top of that now, and it's about maybe, like I said, 4 days, I think, after I did that. So it's been sitting there with plenty of time to dry. But something really weird happened, and I'll point that out a little bit later when I get to that spot. It's not something I was expecting, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about it now. I'll wait until I discover it. Obviously, you're watching this after the fact, and I'm sort of narrating over the top of it. All right, so the color I'm using. Again, I'm using Rembrandt paint. If I can remember what the name of this one is, I'll let you know. I think it's brown ochre, but to be honest, it really doesn't make any difference. You could use, I don't know, raw umber. You could use burnt umber. You could use anything. Use an earth color, though. Use something that dries quickly so that you don't have to wait too long for this to dry, because technically this is just a drawing. It's a sketch. You could paint over this while it's still wet, and as long as the color you're using makes sense, like this is a landscape, so brown kind of makes sense. I wouldn't be using a hot paint to do this, But yeah, I mean, any earth color will do. You could use anything that dries quickly. And this is actually thinned with Gamsol as well. It's just to make it flow, give me a nice sort of incline. When I finished this, I got the idea to go ahead and put some shading in there, some very basic tone structure that I'd paint on top of. And I sort of just got that idea on the fly, not really thinking about it. And that's when I discovered, well, I'll wait till we get there, getting ahead of myself again. But yeah, I'm using a very small brush. It's a number 2 round, a synthetic mongoose blend. And I'm just drawing in the basic outlines of this landscape that I want to do. And I'm freehanding this. So, it's not tied down, it's not locked in, there's no finish to this at all. This is sort of just to get the shapes in and let me know where things are going to be. And with any painting, I think it's important to realize as you do this that nothing is final. You can change things, even as you're painting the block and layer, you can still move things around, and I'm probably going to do that. As of this recording, I have not actually made the base, the block-in layer. But when I'm finished with this video, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'll bring that to you guys probably in a week, because this will take a couple of days to dry, and I want to make sure that it is completely dry before I do the block-in. You might hear me call the block-in layer a dead color layer at some point. You could, very well call it a foundation, or a, blocking or block-in or whatever. It just means that once this initial drawing is done, I'll be literally blocking in colors and values that I will use as a foundation to paint on top of with the final detail. I'll do some modeling, and if we have room, if it suits the painting, I'll go ahead and put another layer on there, which will be the final detail, maybe some glazing. But that's pretty far off. I mean, right now I'm still thinking that I'm going to change the shape of those distant mountains a little bit, because they seem too flat, in terms of how high they are and the evenness of the peak spacing. I think I'll break that up a little bit now that I'm looking at this again. I can't imagine I'd leave it that way. It needs a little bit more variation than that, so I'll probably push them around. And I have no trouble doing that. That's part of the process. So yeah, I do things differently each time I paint. It's strange. I have a process, kind of like a method, but I work within it. It's not rigid structure. It's sometimes I'll just leave it like this and I'll block in over this. But in this particular case, I wanted to add some tonal value before I did that. And I'm about to get to that, so we'll get to my little hiccup here. Okay, so this is a synthetic squirrel brush I'm using. I can't even remember where I got it. It's probably not the right brush to be using, as we'll soon discover. I started blocking in dark color. I mean, I have color on the brush. I was planning to put in some shadows, and then all of a sudden this started happening. I literally started pulling up the ground, and it didn't make any sense to me because it had been drying for 4 days, and it was nothing but that red iron. I don't know what it was. What was it? What did I say it was? Light oxide red. Obviously, that particular color does not dry as quickly as I thought it did. So here you see me making the best of the situation. This is totally off the cusp here. Ad lib, just figuring it out as I go. I was like, oh, I have dark color on my brush, but I'm painting white. This is very interesting. So just maybe next time I won't put the ground in with the light oxide. I like to play around and experiment and see what happens. Obviously, this is what happens when you do what I did. Now, it could be any number of things. It could be the fact that I have let's see, 2 or 3 coats of acrylic neutral gray underneath this. It could be that the canvas is literally not absorbing any oil, but it felt dry to the touch, so I went with it, and now it looks like I'm wiping, sort of a wipeout technique with the brush. But it's okay, because I realized, well, if I can figure out how to get the dark color down, I'll do that. But if I can't figure it out, at least I'll have the lights. I'll put the lights in there and not worry about the shadows. I think at some point I do figure it out, though. I change the consistency of the brown. And this is still the same color I was using before. It's brown ochre, I think. I did want this to dry pretty quick. So one of the things that I've done with this same method, not the same outcome, mind you, but this same method is to put the lines in there and then go in with Gamsol, just straight Gamsol, and pull it around as though it's one of those watercolor, books, paint by number, and the colors are down, and all you have to do is get your brush and put water on it and pull the color around off the lines. Obviously that technique is not going to work here. So if you happen to do the same thing I do, or the same thing that I'm doing here, and you get a different result, let me know, because I'd be curious to know what we did differently to make it change. See, now I've figured it out. I've got a little bit more pigment. I just don't think I had enough pigment. It was too much solvent or something, and just pulled the ground right up. So I am going to wait a week before I put the color over this, because I don't want that happening again. We certainly don't need that happening when I'm blocking in the color. So yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to define where my plane changes are. And I've used the fact that I'm pulling the ground up to my advantage by telling myself, I'm sort of taking notes. This is kind of how I think about it. Taking notes and telling myself, okay, in the future, this is where you're going to put this. This is where you're going to put that shadow. And, I'm thinking right now, oh, that's too dark. I put too much pigment. See, I'm still trying to figure it out. So, that's what we do. We don't start over. Or at least I don't. Just make it work. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's where I'm going to put a shadow. That's where I'm going to put a highlight. Knowing full well that I'm probably going to change it. As a matter of fact, I know I'm going to change that dark shadow over there. It's too high. Either that or the mountain in the middle needs to be higher. They're just too even. They feel too much the same to me right now. That's cool, because that gives the painting some life and a history. Especially since I've documented it with this video. It'll be fun to look at this a year from now and think, whoa. So that's where I went with it, I'll just keep doing this till I get to the foreground, and it's probably not the most ideal job I could have done here. If I were trying to be accurate, the background values would be much lighter than these ones here in the foreground. And I am using a photo reference, by the way. This is I can't even remember. It's a magazine that my wife brought home, and it had a bunch of pictures in it, and I took the mountains from one of them, and there's the sky I liked in a different one. Sort of kit bashed it together. If I wanted it to be really precise, I probably would have put a grid over this. Either that or transferred it with some graphite paper or something, but it's a landscape. It's not as important as a portrait is to get it perfect, so I wasn't really interested in tracing or copying it. I remember thinking, oh, I just really like the way that this mountain range in the front sweeps down in front of the ones in the back, but I didn't like the colors, and this other one had a really great sky, and it was, all the colors were just right in that picture, except it was a completely different scene. So what you're going to see me do is a hybrid of those two. Putting in the sky. Now this was fun because I quickly discovered that I could wipe it out and make the sky lighter, and it was amazing. I was not anticipating this. I thought I was just going to be putting in shadows, but that brush was just pulling it right off. I mean, you can, and that's been drying for 4 days. I still can't get over that. But again, here you see me working with it and figuring out how to make it work. I didn't give up on it. I could have stopped. I could have just left it as lines. But I thought, no, let's just see what happens. And this is what happened. Something I should point out is that I'm not actually trying to put any detail in here. It looks like I am because I'm sitting here working on these things, but these areas. I'm working on these different areas of the picture, right? The sky right now. I'm literally just pulling that ground off like it was just put on there that afternoon, like it was nothing. But I've just, for some reason, I don't even know, I can't explain it. I just knew what to do with it. By this point, I was just so comfortable with it that I just went ahead and sort of took the sky out. And at this point too, I could have made those mountains. I could have reshaped those mountains at this point. But I don't think I was thinking about that. I was thinking, oh, I need to make this work, and I need to make this paint do what I'm trying to do. I'll fix it later. So yeah, this will be finished in about a minute or so, and I'll join you guys again in about a week or so. That's what I think anyway. Plans could change, but that's the plan right now. Wrap this up, give it a solid week to dry. At least a week. I should let it sit for a couple weeks maybe. We'll see. But the next step is to mix up the colors I'm going to use. Basically just going to sample them from the one photo in that magazine and try to figure out a way to translate them to the other photograph. Gonna have to work that out in my head. I could take it into Photoshop and try to make it work that way, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll do a little color study off to the side and see what I can do, and then we'll get back to this one. All right. Well, I'll wrap this up in another 30 seconds or so, and we'll get on with the next video at some point. I'd like to thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions at all. If you have anything you want to know about this or where I might go with it, just shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you when I can. Okay, yeah, I'll see you guys later.